not a game, it's a rich thing.
Hi guys! Eee. That one was pretty funky. I like that one. I always put it on shuffle, so I never know what's gonna come up. So let's see. I saw some chatter. My friends are here. Hey Druid, Robin. I think I saw Marianne. Hi Marianne. Hey guys. Happy Friday Eve. Oh my gosh. I say it every week. The week goes by so fast. Thanks, Druid. And you guys know, I've been getting ready for AQSG seminar, and it is now a week away. Technically less than a week away because I have to be there on Wednesday for a meeting. And I have to deliver my study quilt and all the things. So I am actually going to be getting on the road on Tuesday with my mom from her house. Hey, Word and Bird Nerd. So, so I'll be driving from Virginia to Portland, Maine, starting this coming Tuesday. But I have a family thing going on, and our plans have changed a little bit, but we're literally leaving in a few hours. And we are going to Virginia to visit some other family, my husband's family. So I have like 4 or 5 days of stuff that I have to pack for that. So my living room right now looks like I'm leaving like for Mars. I have a suitcase that's so jammed with like, you know, jeans and t-shirts for the family trip and some nicer things because I have to present at seminar. But you know, when you wear the nicer thing, you don't have to wear it all day. So some days have, you know, a wardrobe change. Oh my goodness, it's ridiculous. I thought I had to take so much stuff when I went to England, you know, because that was going to be overseas 10 days. You know, I had so much stuff. This is actually 12 days. And I don't want to forget anything. So yeah, the packing, I hate packing. Once upon a time, I worked about 3 hours away, and every week I would leave on Wednesday because I did a like all day training sessions. So I would leave early on Wednesday, I'd get down there, I'd do all day training sessions on Thursday and Friday. So I basically had this like to-go bag, like a go bag, all of my toiletries, the things that I wore there because it was kind of uniformy. You know, and I would just wash that stuff, put it right back in. And so it was so easy. I just grabbed the go bag and I'd be ready to go. And then like, you know, anything oddball. But since I don't do that anymore, it just becomes such a production, you know? So anyway, at least I don't have to fly. I do hate flying. Oh yeah, Word and Bird. Yes. I have kind of a general packing list. But yeah, it changes. And like, so one thing I haven't been able to pack is all of this. So my laptop, I don't think I'm going to bring my mic, but my travel monitor, all that stuff, some of the cords and things. And I'm just like, oh, please, Stephanie, don't forget anything. So, yay! I thought I remembered you saying you would be there, Word. So I look forward to seeing you. Like I said, I'll be there on Wednesday, have a meeting. So, yeah, whenever you arrive, look for me. Jill will be there too. I'm not sure if Mary Fons is coming this year or not. I have not talked to her. Mary Ann Fons will be there. I'm actually on a panel with her. So that'll be fun. And a whole bunch of friends that I've only seen maybe once or twice this year. Some I've never seen. Some I haven't seen in a while. So, yeah. So you had to cancel your, I'm assuming it's that British Quilt Study Group. Yeah, I'm not sure what they've been up to. I talked to Carolyn Gibbs at, I talked to Carolyn Gibbs when I was there in Birmingham. So they've got a whole bunch of stuff, I guess, going on. Anyway, so that was a long story to tell you guys that it's going to be a short one today. I have a very cool quilt I want to show you. I have begun a study of it, and it's kind of going to be like a formal study because I have a presentation I'm going to do about it and, possibly some other content. But I'm going to show you guys first. And I may, when I archive this video, I may cut out this section where I show the quilt so that we kind of keep it under wraps for the rest of the world so that people will want to register for when I do the lecture. So we're going to do that. And then, I've skipped a few readings of traditional quilting with Mavis Fitzrandolph. So we'll get back in there. We left off, we finished up with batting/wadding. So we want to get to the covers today. And I just wanted to give you a heads up. I have chosen two books. We're probably only about, 2/3 of the way through traditional quilting, I think. Because I'm reading a digital copy, it's kind of hard to tell. But I have Elizabeth Hake's book, English Quilting Old and New, that Mavis Fitzrandolph, see, this was published, had to have been before Mavis Fitzrandolph's book. So yeah, this is 1937, and then it was republished in 1988. So I think this is the 88 version. But 1937, Mavis Fitzrandolph's book, of course, was 1954. Mavis Fitzrandolph references this book a lot, and it's a very thin book. So when we get to it, it'll be a quick read. But I think it'll be good. It's got, it's got some short narrative. It's got a bunch of pictures. So yeah, this might be like just a couple streams read. And then I have a fun one, maybe to get to probably around, maybe around the holidays, depending on how long a reading takes. But yeah, I'm not gonna reveal what that one's gonna be, but it'll be a fun one. It's off topic of the hardcore quilting data and intel we have been exploring. And it's I think it might be kind of long, so that one might kind of finish our year out. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know. But as always, if you come across anything that you think might be interesting to read, please let me know. It's like I'm always coming across new stuff. And I had a conversation with somebody recently, as far as reading books online. Living authors, no dice. Because even if their books are out of print, they still, they still make money off of it. Or they have the potential to. So without permission, I don't want to do that. That's stepping on toes. So I've kind of drawn the line at kind of anything from the 70s and before, even though I kind of am committing an egregious copyright act when I get into the stuff that's not in the public domain. But I don't think anybody's coming after me for reading something from the 50s or the 60s. So anyway, if you guys come across anything, please send it my way. Like I said, I'm always coming across new stuff that, just when I think I've seen it all, something new pops up. So, all right. Oh, also a reminder, and I'll say it again at the end. No stream next Monday, next Thursday, and then the following Monday. So I will be back on Thursday, and like Thursday the 23rd. The 23rd. Yeah, like the month is gonna be like nearly over by the time I get here. So, Marianne, yes, I do. I have a sort of a loose list. It's more like up here, but yeah, as we finish a book here, I sort of put it in a stack over on my bookshelf. The books I do have hard time remembering are the ones we do over on Quilt Nerding, because we've read a lot of books there, and we're doing multiple chapters at a time every week, so sometimes I forget those. But yeah, I think between me and Jill, we pretty much know everything that we read. I should, you know what, but it's a good question that you're asking. I should put it out on the Cake TV page on Facebook. So I will make a note to do that, so you guys know what I read. And I think everything might be out on YouTube at this point. That's terrible. I don't remember. Probably not the early stuff. So like the Ruth Finley stuff that I was reading. Oh gosh, it's going on 2 years now, I guess. I don't think that stuff's on YouTube, because those were some pretty bad videos. In a spare nanosecond, yeah. You guys know what my life is like, because it's probably just like yours. All right, so that's the important announcements. Let me get to what we're gonna look at. And this, like I said, it's gonna be brief, but never before seen. So let's see. All right, you're gonna have to excuse the area this was taken in, because I usually do a better job of curating my photos, but this is what I'm calling the Emma quilt. When it was sent to me, so it's a little bit of a long story how I got it. It was a friend of a friend, basically. The quilt was offered to, and to back up a little bit, it is technically not a finished quilt. It is a crazy quilt. It is not bound. It's very neatly whipped along the edges. I still think it is something that was probably displayed. But that begs the question. It doesn't have a backing. It doesn't have binding. So a little bit of a question mark there, but I'm looking into these things. But the person that sent it to me, because the woman who made it, we know the woman that made it. This is the fabulous thing. Like, how often do we ever find a really fabulous quilt and then know who made it? But I know who made it, and I know the person that has given the quilt to me. She is a descendant. So I have a frame of reference, and that's so very helpful. Like, oh my gosh, not something that more often than not do we have. So when you do have that, it's such a great opportunity if you're into research. So very quickly, the woman that made this was named Rose Emma Myers. And so when I was first contacted about possibly receiving this quilt and doing a study on it, we were calling it the Rose quilt. But as soon as I dipped into who Rose was, I found out that she didn't go by Rose. She went by her middle name, Emma, for whatever reason. And just to run down the quick facts, she was married to a man named Frank Young. And I'm trying to think, his middle name starts with a D. And it's an oddball name. I thought it was spelled wrong. It's not Delaney or Delano. It's something very close, but it's kind of an odd name. And he is from New York, and she is from Knoxville, Pennsylvania, which is very far northern, like northwestern part of Pennsylvania. It's like literally just over the western New York border. So for all intents and purposes, she probably kind of went back and forth. It was easy for her to get to New York. They were married in 1906? Yeah, 1906, March 1906. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, let's see, 1906. And I don't know anything about her yet because all I have is this very cute little, it's not a real, it's not like, it's kind of like the church marriage certificate. If you got married in a church, if you're married, you might have had a situation where the minister and your witnesses sign a paper, but this isn't the one that like goes to the state. The one that goes to the state is a separate like license usually, whereas this is like a certification. So that's what I have, and it's very pretty. It has here, I'll flip back for a second so you can see it. It's pretty. It has like this floral stuff on it. So just very turn of the century looking little document. So this is just a copy of it. So I immediately start thinking to myself, you start building these stories in your head. And I had let the descendant know that I couldn't really start looking at this quilt a whole lot until I got back from England, because it went from her to a friend and from that friend to me. She had tried to donate this to a historical society there around Knoxville, Pennsylvania. I assume it's a very small historical society. They were either not interested, or I think it just boiled down to they were not interested. They told her they didn't have the ability to, preserve it and store it. And I'm kind of like, this thing is not that big. I mean, all it really needs is a like archival box and some acid-free tissue to kind of, wrap it and pad it, and just would need an occasional refolding. It's really stable. It's got a few areas in it that are, have seen some deterioration, but for the most part is in really, really good shape. And so again, I'm kind of concocting this story in my head because I haven't had a chance to look at anything about her. And so I'm thinking, well, it's 1906, so I don't know, maybe she's like in her 20s. That would make her born in like 1880, or thereabouts. And like if she was born in like 1870 something, 1880, she would have been really young to have made this quilt like at the height of the crazy quilt fad, which was 1885 is kind of like the pinnacle. They're still popular in the 1890s, but by the time we get to the turn of the century, this Victorian frou-frou-ness is kind of on the wane. Lots of people still made crazy quilts in the 20th century, but they're not like this. They're those farmhouse crazy quilts that are like with cotton. The Amish were making crazy quilts with wool, but all the way up until like the 30s and yeah, I think it was the 20s and 30s. Those ones that we looked at from the Esprit collection. So I thought to myself like, this is interesting. So I dip in and start looking for her, and she was actually pretty easy to find. People that don't move around a lot tend to be pretty easy to find. And so she had grown up in this community. She had a couple of siblings, but she appears on her parents', and her parents, is her surname on the quilt? No. Just her first name. And her married name is Young, because her husband is Frank Young, and her maiden name is Myers. So, and that's because I have this, and that this is from the descendant. So, I find her, and I did a little bit of double checking just to make sure it was her, and then I did a little bit of extra double checking to make sure the Frank Young I was finding was also the right person. And I've, at the time I'm like, I'm about 95% sure I've got the right people. There was a Rose Young, as I was originally looking for, Rose Emma Young. Rose Young was a common name. Believe it or not, Myers and Young are common last names, and, and then names like Rose and Emma are very common in, this time period. So anyway, and I start looking, and so she had lived with her parents. She shows up on like all the censuses, and she's back and forth between New York and Pennsylvania. And come to find out, I'm like, she's living with her parents for a really long time. Like her siblings had left. And I finally realize I'm doing the math on all the censuses, and I keep going back and back and back. And something that's interesting, so the 1890 census, if you do genealogy, you know exactly what I'm going to say. The 1890 census most of it was destroyed in a fire. So unfortunately, it's a perfect census. It would have been great. It would have helped a lot of people that are into genealogy, because the 1890s were like that era and the time before, the decades before were, this is a high time for immigration. It's, a lot of stuff, we're kind of out of restoration from the Civil War, and there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of industry, a lot of people. And it would be super helpful for lots of people doing genealogy. But alas, our government just let that burn down. There are a few pieces of the 1890 census out there, but it's not generally super helpful. However, because she had lived in New York, I found the half-decade censuses, because New York and sometimes Pennsylvania, sometimes New York, they did, so the census is on the 10s, and they did a census on the 5s, a state census. So I found her at like just born in 1860, 5 years old in 1865. Like I don't know that I have these dates exactly right, but this is what I'm finding. So I was like, this lady was born before the Civil War. She actually might have been born in like 1850 something. But I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So, again, I do the math, and she was in her 50s when she got married. And so was Frank. Now, Frank, he had a previous wife who passed away. He had a couple kids, actually 3, I think. 2 of them. So he had a daughter, was the oldest, and then there was a middle child who was a boy, and then the youngest was a boy. And I think by the time he and Emma got married, the oldest child was, she was old enough to be out of the house. Like she was leaving home, and probably married. And then the middle child was a teenager, and he probably left soon after. And so there's this youngest child. Well, unfortunately, I find the obituary for Frank. Frank died about 15 months after they got married. This is heartbreaking. They are the second couple that I have researched within the past year that this happened to. That they were older when they got married, and then he died very soon after. So it's heartbreaking. But here is the beautiful romance in the story. So I kind of got all this put together, and then I'm trying to go back and double check all the censuses to see where they've lived. And of course I'm seeing her, listed. And the interesting thing that was about her was in her early 20s, she is listed in a Knoxville, Pennsylvania directory. I think it was Pennsylvania. She might have still been in New York, but I guess I don't have to hide this from anybody because I don't have any of my facts straight yet. But her father is listed as the head of the household at this address with, I'm trying to think if there was a phone number. I don't think there even was a phone number because phones wouldn't have been there at the time, but he's listed at this address. She's listed separately at the same address. And it's that's odd, especially in the 1800s, a young woman still living in her father's home, but she's listed as a separate address. Well, she was a milliner, and she had her own business pretty much all of her adult life. In her later years, after Frank passed away, she actually opened her own millinery shop. And surprisingly, this area of Knoxville, milliner. And it seems like I have not yet found a freestanding shop with her name on it, at least up until we get to the point where in her older age I found a newspaper article or a newspaper thing. But okay, so students listed separately. Yeah, she definitely was a milliner. I found sort of corroborating evidence on the censuses that listed her as a milliner from way back. Oh, that's interesting, Wordbird. I'll have to look for that. But I think they both say home address. The funny thing is, this little teeny tiny town was actually closer to a sort of a bigger area in Pennsylvania, and that's where the newspaper came from. It was about, 15 or 20 minutes away. That newspaper lists obscene number of milliners in the late 1800s. So I'm like trying to figure out where she might have worked as she bounced back and forth between the states. And also to say that she was moving with her parents and, you know, her father. I think her mother passed away at some point. I haven't documented that date yet. The county I'm blanking on. Oh crud! It's the town is Knoxville, PA. I'm completely blanking on the town. I have not looked. Tioga might be in that area. It's a different county though. I didn't pull up any of my notes, you guys, so I apologize. I really wasn't planning on doing all the history, but the romantic story is so great. So I will end with the romantic story, and then we can look at the quilt itself. So I'm double checking Frank, and I'm looking at the census. And again, if you've never done genealogy, you know, the censuses they're like a gold mine of information, but they also, from every decade, they're a little bit different. They added things, they took away things, and sometimes it's random. I don't know, it's just random. Oh, your grandfather was from Tioga. Yeah, I know Tioga's close to New York. I do think it's in that general area. Anyway, so some censuses, you know, it's like a big ledger type thing. And sometimes, you know, the image that you'll see like on Ancestry, you'll go across, and it'll be like the same person all the way across. Even though it's this kind of 2-page thing. In other censuses, you have one page is like, you know, all the information, and then the next page of the spread is like more people. You know, it's like it's a 1-page thing. So Ancestry and all of the resources online, what they'll do when you find a person on the census that's just like the big wide one, it'll highlight the person that you're looking for, or the family. But when you've got that 2-page census situation, it doesn't highlight. It won't highlight just like that 1 page. It's irritating. I don't understand why it won't, but I mean, if it can find the people with this horrible handwriting, you'd think that it would be able to highlight. But anyway, so the census I was looking at, I think it was like the 1870 or 1880 census. I'm trying to think. I think it would have been the 1880 census. Yeah. So I'm looking, and, you know, terrible handwriting. So I'm like, you know, on my computer screen, like, you know, going down the list. And I'm looking for Frank, but all of a sudden I find Emma, and I'm like, what? Did I click the wrong census? You know, and sometimes when you've got a married couple, sometimes the one person's name will show up, but the document you look at is actually another person. So an example would be a death certificate. You might be looking for Frank Young's death certificate, but Emma Young shows up. And when you click that, it's still Frank Young's death certificate, but she's listed as the informant. So that's why her name comes up associated with that document. And so in my mind, I'm going like, okay, why would Emma be associated with the census? It's way before she and Frank. And I'm like, oh my God, they knew each other. They knew each other in their 20s. So they were neighbors and this is when they're all living in New York. They were neighbors. And apparently they were seeing each other. And according to the descendant, the family didn't want him to marry her. And I've got a little bit of an inkling why. I need to talk to her further and clarify a few things before I sort of land on that. It was a dumb reason. If they loved each other, it was a dumb reason. But in any event, they you know, the families move apart, whatever. He ends up marrying a woman from, I think it was from Delaware, either Delaware or Connecticut. She was from Connecticut, and again has the kids. She never gets married. She is a businesswoman through and through until she's in her 50s. So, yeah, so they did not get together until he was a widower. Exactly. His youngest child at the time they got together, I want to say he was about 11. And the ancestor shared a picture because she is a descendant of that youngest child. So she's actually not related by blood to Emma. She's related by blood to Frank. But there is a picture she sent me of Frank and this youngest child. And it had to have been taken not long before Frank died, because the boy looks like he's, as this man as a boy looks like he's only about 10 or 11, and Frank died when he was about 11. And come to find out, she then later censuses in the 20th century, this younger child is living with her. Guessing, both of his parents, his birth parents, have died, and he's living with his stepmother, and he lives with her for at least a decade, probably longer. There's that point where you're kind of like, he shows up on a 1930 census in another place, but he's with her in the 1920 census, right? So, oh gosh, I hope we're not having any internet issues. You guys are coming through here, so, yeah. So, anyway, according to what the ancestor has told me, she and her stepson had a very good relationship. A very loving relationship. She lived until, I think, into her 80s, and she took very good care of him. And I mean, what a tragic yet heartwarming yet romantic yet what good people, it's just all the things, and just being able to put all of these little things together into this story. And I still have lots more research to do. So anyway, this is Emma. And I'm hoping at some point to be able to find a picture of her, because I have the picture of Frank, and the picture of the youngest child, but that's it at this point. So in the center of the quilt, we see Emma. And my guess, this is just a hypothesis at this point, my guess is this quilt was made during the crazy quilt, fad. It would have been made in the 1880s. The fabrics are very nice, and all of the ribbons and things are in very good condition. The stitching is impeccable. I'm fairly certain numerous people worked on this quilt, or this piece. And my guess, and this is again just a hypothesis, is these are their initials, possibly. And there are a few other M's on here. One there, and the cool thing is I don't have pictures of this to show you yet, but the back of the quilt, or the backing, because it doesn't have an actual backing, it only has I can see, and this is the great thing, I can see the foundations. The foundations that have the M are all, yes, her last name is Myers, but I don't think that's what this is about, because she would not have been she's not with Frank for another 20 years possibly, or 15 years at this point, or 25 years. This quilt could have been made 25 years before she got married. And yeah, I would stake, I'm not going to stake my life on anything, but I would stake the amount of money that I would spend in Vegas or Reno on the fact that M is not for Myers at all. I think this M is for somebody that made this quilt with her, or made it for her. I think it's also possible that she did not work on this at all, that it was made for her. And I suspect, going back to the materials, I suspect that it was her maybe millinery shop friends, or some sort of configuration of people like that. Whether she worked on this or not, a lot of the big pieces in here are actually ribbon. You know what? Oh my God. I was reading this as a C. Worded bird nerd. No, you're not being dense. I'm being dense. It still doesn't make sense why it was made when it was made. Maybe it was made after 1906. I swear I never saw Myers when I looked at those letters. Emma Myers. You're absolutely right. How did I not see that? Oh my God, you guys. Yes, Myers is her maiden name. Yes, I'm sorry. Young is her married name. Myers is her maiden name. You're absolutely right, though. Yeah. It does say Emma Myers. Okay, I'm an idiot. But anyway, the M's all use the same backing. So, I cannot believe I did not see that. I swear, I thought this was a C. This is why I love you guys, because I'm a dummy sometimes. I swear, I thought this was a C, and then I don't know what I thought this one was. It's interesting when you see a quilt on the wall. It turns out differently than it is when you're looking at it in pieces. Anyway, it is. And this is a very common script that you see on these quilts, is this like very dense, like, you know, illuminated manuscripts type of text. I can't remember what this is called. It's not, I don't think it's black letter. Black letter's a little bit different, I think. But in any event, I mean, this is one of those really popular fonts. All right, so let me show you a couple of close-ups of things that are on this quilt. And again, have not at all dipped into researching the imagery that's on this quilt, aside from I've kind of noted a few things. This little devil. Now this is painted on velvet, and then there's this separate piece, and these are two separate pieces. They're seamed here. There's these owls. Owls are very common on crazy quilts, and if you remember, if you guys were following along with Quilt Nerding when we read Penny McMorris's Crazy Quilts book, and I know not everybody loves crazy quilts, but if you're starting a crazy quilt, Penny McMorris's book is fantastic. You know, she looks at some of the common things that are on these quilts. So the owls are very common on quilts. This little devil guy, not so much. I've never seen that before. So I'm thinking this has got to be something. You know, maybe it's an advertising thing. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just, you know, I was trying to think like what maybe would have been in like the pop culture of the time. So I don't know. I've seen a number of quilts with like the Dutch cleanser. You guys know what I'm talking about? She's the lady, she's got like a cudgel or something, and she's kind of like marching, you know, she's running to beat the dirt out of something. I've seen that on quilts, bunches of quilts, and I think that's kind of a turn of the century thing too. And she's actually illustrated by the same woman, Bertha, that did the original Sunbonnet Babies illustrations. So like people would pick those things up out of pop culture, and I mean, it's the Dutch cleanser lady is literally advertising, but people drew her and stitched her on quilts. So that's what I'm wondering, if this little devil guy is something. In looking at it, all I could see is the little guy from Hormel Deviled Ham. I think, is it Hormel? Or no, it's another company maybe. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's a little tiny can, and it used to be wrapped in like, it had like a white paper wrapping. You'd open that all up, and it had like ground ham in it. I know my dad used to eat deviled ham sandwiches all the time. But that's, let's see, tarot cards. Possibility. Robin knows what we're talking about. Underwood, thank you, word for nerd. That's what he reminds me of, but the Underwood devil is red. And doesn't he? I think he has a pitchfork. Anyway, was Underwood available back then? I don't know. So anyway, I'm kind of on the lookout for that. Like, where does that come from? This also got me. And both of these are, so I've hanging the quilt so that Emma is this way. And I guess now that you guys have ripped the veil over my eyes, and I can actually see that says Myers now and not just random letters. The devil and this bird are upside down. So it seems to me that, you know, all of these blocks were made and then put together later. And, you know, some of them just ended up like this. but it's clearly a bird of some sort standing at a music stand singing. I mean, how clever, how cute. So these are the kind of things I really love about crazy quilts, because they may not necessarily point to anything that's like really specifically identifiable, like, oh, this is the bird from blah blah blah, but rather this is what is in sort of their, whatever's going on in their consciousness. So yes, I believe this bird has a monocle. That's what it looks like to me, right there. It's sort of stork-like, but it could be any kind of bird, I guess. Um, so like, I don't know. Is there some kind of funny thing in 18 whatever? These are the things that I hope to maybe find or come across. Now there are all of the other, your other standard things. Like you can see down here, the little kids. Those are those Kate Greenaway. Um, a goose. Yeah. You know what, Marianne? You're kind of right. That kind of looks a little goosey. I don't know. Are these webbed feet? Or are they just, who knows? Could be a duck. But you got the Kate Greenaway embroideries down here. They're very common. In fact, I have several other crazy quilts that are not in very good condition, but they all have the Kate Greenaway on them. If they have any kind of just dense embroidery. Lots of flowers. Lots and lots of flowers. The corners have our ubiquitous fan. And if you remember, I think there was a section in Penny McMorris's book where she talks about, this Victorian, obsession with Orientalism. So, Japanese and Chinese, just clothing and fabrics and imagery. So while this fan, of course, is like really more of the Dresden type fan, it is meant to look like a lady's fan. And then also you'll see the, and I don't think that, now I'm blanking if there's one on this one, but you'll see the ones that are kind of like a paddle. Those are often, very often in crazy quilts too. So that's something to look for in a ubiquitous crazy quilt. Does it have the fans? Because that is another, what I would say is another indicator that it was made during the fad time. Not to say that somebody couldn't have said, oh, I want to make a crazy quilt in 1920 and put some fans in it. I'm sure it happened. But people were more likely to, I think, to have kind of ridden this fad and done these things in 1880s. Shoes. So we've got our high top boot. Then there's this one. Now I have a source for the advertising for this type of shoe. I just need to track it down. So there is a company called American Duchess that makes, and Bernard, I think you know who they are, because I think I remember talking to you about, I think it was you, about some historical costuming stuff. And American Duchess makes reproduction shoes, period shoes. And it's funny, I was actually watching a show the other day. I'm blanking on what show was, but it would have been taking place like in the 30s. And I noticed the woman wearing a pair of shoes that I'm like, those are definitely from American Duchess. So they sell a lot of shoes to the movie and television industry, but they also sell a lot of shoes to costumers. This shoe specifically, they have remade, and I think they've made it in several colors. I think it comes in red and black. Every time they put it on sale, I look at it and think it's such a cool shoe, but like when and where would I ever use this or wear this? But basically it's their straps, and they typically button on the side. So it's like this, it's almost like you took a high top boot and cut the whole front of it off and replaced it with straps. And I think those shoes, if I'm remembering correctly, are 1880s, 1890s. You've got this vase here that's to me reads as very Asian, like maybe a Chinese glazed vase. There's a little Kate Greenaway girl. And the embroidery is all pretty good, but there are some that I would say are more skilled than others. Some of the little imagery is a little, I don't want to say it's clunky or bad or anything. It's just a little bit less amazing than some of the others. This I thought was really interesting when I took this picture. I'm pretty sure this was embroidered along with the girl, because it looks like you kind of see some markings there, like pencil markings. But this is pretty skilled embroidery. This is some very tight little satin stitches. But there are other pieces of fabric in here that clearly have a stitched motif that I'm pretty sure that the makers didn't stitch. It was some type of, like a kind of a damask or a jacquard kind of looking fabric. But I suspect that it was like a machine embroidery is really what it is. And that I keep going back to the fact that these are ribbons. A lot of this is ribbon. It's there are silk fabrics, there are velvet fabrics in here, but there's a lot I can point to that I'm 99% sure are ribbons. And when you get in here into the edges, you can see that's an already finished ribbon edge. Now, women definitely in the 1800s collected ribbons for all kinds of purposes. Quilt nerding, we read the dress diary that began in the 1840s, and she collected lots of ribbons and pasted them in her book. She would trade ribbons with her friends, and I'm thinking like there's snippets of ribbons. They maybe bought yards or meters of ribbon to use as embellishments on dresses and in needlework, and sometimes they just literally tied a ribbon around their neck with a little bow, as a little doodad. But these wider ribbons, I think a lot of times were for hats or trimmings on dresses, and so that was what I'm seeing is a lot of this. The combinations of stitches are really, really nice. And they've done such a good job. And there is even more velvet painting. Whether it was just Emma or if it was a group of people that made this quilt, they had access to or skill in velvet painting. So that's what this is. And if you've never touched it, it's definitely like crusty. The first time I ever saw this on a crazy quilt, it was decades ago, really, and not knowing anything about crazy quilts at the time, I was like, ew, what is this like velvet painting crap? Like, this can't possibly be old. Like, black velvet paintings, like Velvet Elvis, like what? And then later on I discovered, oh, this was a craft. This was also a fad back then. So this one, let's see, I think this is all painted too, but this has got that look. Where embroidered, I don't know. If you could buy commercially made embroidery, could you also buy already painted velvet? It is entirely possible that there were people out there that were painting velvet, like little things. So when you go back and think about evidence that we have found, quilt researchers have found of people pretty far back making, ready-made blocks for other people, or like literally cutting out a kit. We have evidence of that here in Baltimore, where with the Baltimore album quilts, there was a particular woman who they think was running a workshop type of situation where she had a bunch of quilters and stitchers that could make blocks or ready-made quilts, or like they were churning out a few things. And it was suspected that she would possibly cut out an entire block, all of the applique, and sell it to someone. So it's entirely possible by the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s there might have been somebody that this is what they did, painting on velvet, and that you could buy these little things from them. But it's definitely a craft that was popular. Um, and like I said, I think that these are very, well made, whether they were made by Emma herself or whoever helped, if somebody helped, if people helped, which again I suspect somebody did. Um, they're very well made. I have another one that's just a piece. I think that was made to one day go into a quilt. That is just not as good. It's a little like gloppy. Maybe the person that did that didn't have very good control of their, using paint, and it just kind of gloppy. Whoever did these, I think, had a pretty decent control, because they've got this gradation, and, this looks definitely like, I don't think it's wheat. I think it's one of those kind of weedy looking, like a weed looking plants. Let's see. These are just a few more flowers. A little bit of deterioration here. This is a shattered silk. Here's a maybe an M, maybe a W. I'm guessing maybe it's an M. I'm not sure. Now that you guys have uncovered what I've been looking at, Myers, like, I still can't believe it. Sometimes you can't see what's right in front of you. So, this one has a little bit, I think it's this one, that it's come unstitched. I want to do a little bit of conservation with it, just to, some tacking stitches to make sure things don't fall off. This cat is fabulous. You've got the Kate Greenaway children. You've got this little pagoda, these little pagodas, and then this lovely songbird. I guess it's the swallow. Another Kate Greenaway. So yeah, and so in the little children, I want to confirm. I mean, I'm sitting here saying Kate Greenaway, Kate Greenaway. They have that appropriate look. I just need to confirm. Some of the ribbon and the embroidery, oh my gosh, just stunning. This is just beautiful right here. And here's like this piece of lace. Just lovely things in there. There's all kinds of little surprises. These also very lovely with some variegated thread, perhaps. This is a velvet, like an embossed velvet. This is another one. This was interesting because this is not painted on velvet, and I have seen things painted on silk, and that's what this is. And you could see that I think the velvet painting tends to survive better, I guess, because the little fibers, the pile kind of holds on to the paint better. This you can see is like crackly, almost like batik, just because the silk is so thin. This is one piece of fabric that, I really can't tell. This looks hand stitched, but it strikes me as something that was already made, right? Like, and then this is almost like a damask. So yeah, there's a lot of things in here that just they just make me feel like haberdashery, hat makers. They had access to nice fabrics and a lot of ribbon. This is also so charming. This little parasol. And these embroideries I thought were just amazing. This little parasol. And this is another one. I'm pretty sure that this is stitched by, the makers. But also, I don't know, because look how it's kind of cut off here. This could have been an existing embroidery that somebody had stitched and it just ended up in this quilt. I don't know. But, it kind of begs the question, why is it cut off like that? And then these narrower ribbons that somebody has placed on top. Another piece that I showed you. Yeah. There's so many things in these quilts that I think you kind of start to see them over and over, and you can just, some embroidery. You can just see like You know, you think about today when we look at modern and contemporary quilts, or better yet, all of the 70s and 80s fabric that I have collected and I've been messing around with. Anytime I put that stuff, you know, on social media or talk to somebody about it, and I always get like, oh yeah, I have some of that fabric. Oh yeah, that fabric. So within our quilt making world, fabrics and things, sometimes you see things you've never seen before and you have no idea where they could have gotten XYZ. But a lot of times you see things just over and over that are very similar. They're in the cultural, you know, the cultural zeitgeist. The same vendors and peddlers and general stores and shipping companies, etc., are bringing these things. And, you know, within a geographic area, you're going to see a lot of these like over and over. So here's a better picture of the owls. And the owls actually have damage here. And you can see that there is some batting underneath this one, I think. There's a batting, which is interesting. Because typically these kind of fabrics are placed right down on the backing, the foundation piece. And sometimes they're basted down. Sometimes I think they're just pinned down. And then the embroidery stitching would hold them. This embroidery stitching does go all the way through to the foundation in most places. And there's Myers that I could not read until today. So as you can see, I've spent more time on the genealogy than the quilt. So that is the Emma quilt. Again, lots more work to do. And yet I'm seeing something now I didn't even show you guys. There's an embroidered ribbon that's clearly, very clearly machine embroidered. So yeah, I'm really excited to, you know, or I'm hopeful. I can't say excited because sometimes you get excited about research and then you just spin your wheels. You go over and over and you never find anything. But I'm hopeful because it was very relatively simple to find her. I'm hoping I can turn something up in this little area that she lived in later in life. She lived there. Well, let's see. She was there before she married Frank, so she probably lived there maybe 40 years in this small town. So, and this small town actually did have a early directory, and I did find some pretty comprehensive details about, you know, who were the people in this town and what were their professions. So, you know, I have to circle back on that kind of stuff. So I will give you guys updates as I work. But yeah, it's pretty exciting to, you know, work on something like this. You know, the quilts I have, I mean, I have family quilts, and then I do have quilts with a little bit of information. Like I don't have any very old quilts with, you know, inked names. I have a few quilts that have like Aunt Gladys and some that just have first names. I do have I have one signature quilt that was clearly a charity situation, it's from a particular place in Pennsylvania and has lots of first and last names. So that's another one that is on my list to research, but that poor quilt is just not interesting looking because it's all green. It's green and white and the embroidery is green. And this crazy quilt was more interesting. So, and also it was given to me with, you know, I don't want to say promise, but it was given to me with the expectation that I would research it. So that's where we're at. And I obviously have a lot more work to do. It will be, I'm going to have some regular research time when I come back from seminar. So, all right. Oh, it is Tioga County. Okay. I didn't remember. I don't know. For some reason, Tioga does not sound familiar to me. But it has been about a month since I was doing this. Okay. Sure, Druid. Yeah. I want to get to the reading for a little bit, but yes, just put their info in there for me when we get to the end. Well, gosh, we're Bird Nerd. What if you say it was your grandfather? What if your grandfather knew her? Wouldn't that be wild? What if he was her next door neighbor? I think Tioga County was pretty big, so and it wasn't definitely this little town is not all that Tioga County is, I know. So, okay. Let's read some Mavis. We learned some interesting stuff about English quilting the other day. I'm going to put up this picture. I think we have a few other pictures before we're done here. So we'll see how far I get. Like I said, I'm planning on ending a little bit early today. Just simply because I gotta do that packing, y'all. I pack the car. So I would say maybe get about halfway through here. We'll get to materials at least. So, okay. As a reminder, we are reading, bear with me, reading Traditional Quilting by Mavis Fitzrandolph. It is primarily quilts from the northern part of England and South Wales. Which, yeah, I mean, I guess they kind of are, they kind of connect. She hasn't talked a whole lot about quilts in other parts of England, and I don't think it's because they didn't make quilts. It just the plethora of quilts seem to be Welsh and Northern England. So we have gotten to, my goodness, what chapter are we on? We are on chapter 5, the materials. And we have gotten through the wadding / the padding / the batting. And we are going to start now, part 2 of this chapter, the covers. So, also a reminder, this book was written in 1954. And I just love Mavis Fitzrandolph. She's not super snarky, but she's pretty darn entertaining, I think. She's got a few little zingers. All right. So bear with me a little bit. Let me get my yeah, Word and Bird Nerd. So Knoxville, I have a hard time getting it to come up when I'm looking in places. It will finally come up in the newspapers. It'll come up and it's a town that's kind of southeast of Knoxville. It'll come up. But yeah, it always wants to say Knoxville, Tennessee instead of Knoxville, Pennsylvania. So Wellsboro, yeah. I think Wellsboro is exactly. It's the Wellsboro Agitator. Like, what a newspaper, the Agitator. Yeah, I think it's the Wellsboro Agitator that is close by. So, all right, so the covers. Surviving 18th century quilts are of satin, silk, or linen, or occasionally cotton. Quilts with red lutestring lining and linsey back are heard of in the 18th century, and quilts of red silk, REDDSYLKE, and of changeable and black and white silk and yellow sarsenet, which I think is also sarsenet, is what that's referring to, are recorded in the 16th century, so 1500. Yeah, and I mean, I get these are just like comforters kind of thing. The ordinary farmhouse or cottage quilt, doubtless used until it fell to pieces, must have been of homespun woolen or linen, or the mixture of these called linsey woolsey, until imported calico and later printed cotton materials became cheap enough for general use. The oldest farmhouse quilts which I have found, made towards the end of the 18th or early in the 19th century, are of thick, rough homespun, vegetable dyed in dark colors, or of cotton patchwork with a plain underside. Even when wool was no longer spun and woven at home in these sheep farming districts, stuff quilts of cloth or flannel remained popular throughout the 19th century. a Carmarthenshire quilter born in 1871 recalled that cloth woven in the local mills of wool sent in by neighboring farmers was popular for quilts in her youth, in two colors, such as rose or blue with maroon. Some used French merino bought in the shop, and later sateen. Other Welsh quilters mentioned flannel, made and dyed for the purpose in some of the numerous small woolen mills, and printed flannel or flannel handprint, and also cashmere. So, right true with the agitator. Um, so I think when she's talking about stuff. Stuff is often the term used for wool, or types of wool, and the flannel that she's referencing is also wool flannel. It wouldn't be like the soft nappy flannel that we have now, and like flannel shirts. The coarseness of some of the material used may be judged from the fact that an old quilter who worked for farmers described some of the Welsh cloth which was provided for her to quilt as a bit rough on the hands. Gosh, can you imagine? I didn't even think about this. So, she made a big deal about scouring the wool, and how poorly scoured wool was icky. But I think even properly scoured wool retains some lanolin. And so you think about, working with wool that has the lanolin would probably be good for your hands, but also if it's scratchy and you're constantly handling it, that might also be itchy to your hands. So like, is it one of those things that it's like making your hands like itchy and rough, but then the lanolin is fixing it? So maybe you come out even. I don't know. The coarseness of some of the material. So it was a bit rough on the hands. It was a general rule to have different colors for the top and the undercover, I think meaning the backing. And the Welsh delighted in strong colors. This is interesting. Strong colors such as red, magenta, maroon, dark blue, green, purple, brown, and even black. Where have you seen some of those colors recently? Some of those colors would have been brighter, but Lancaster Amish quilts, perhaps. There is definitely, and I think I mentioned this the other day, there is a theory, and I still can't quite wrap my head around it, but there's a theory that there's a connection between the Welsh quilts of this period, 19th century Welsh quilts, and 19th century Amish quilts, the early Amish quilts, the square in a square or the diamond in a square, particularly. I don't know, I can see it for sure. I mean, when you look at some of those quilts, you're like, oh my God, they look exactly the same. The quilting is very different. In fact, the Welsh quilter sometimes worked with a backstitch, although I think Mavis has dispelled a little bit of that, but also I have seen examples of it. So, I think maybe they didn't always do the backstitch, but I think they sometimes did. And I think it's because of it depended on the thickness of the fabric and the wool. But anyway, the Amish didn't start quilting until at least the 1860s-ish, maybe a little bit earlier. I think there were some quilts that were earlier, like maybe 1840s, 1850s. I want to, and actually, wait a minute. Let me roll that back. I think that the oldest quilt, maybe, and I don't know if it was in the Esprit collection or not. I want to say it was 1849. Might have been the oldest Amish quilt that, I guess, been documented, or was part of that collection. But yeah, Word Bird Nerd, there are the Welsh people that emigrated. Lots of Welsh and Irish emigrated, because of jobs, like the fact that the mining, for the mining areas of England, those workers could come here and go to the mining areas of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and so on as we, moved across the country. But also because they were not treated very well by the English. So, there was a lot of immigrants for that reason as well, particularly the Welsh. So, I think it is entirely possible that people, from these Welsh communities came and ended up in Pennsylvania and were the neighbors of some of the Amish. So, yes, Dorothy Osler. Yeah, I knew I'd seen a book about it. I haven't read it, but I am familiar with that book. And I don't think I have it. I think my mom might have it. In any event, it's interesting. It is truly interesting. And, the wools and these colors. And as my friend that does the quilt turning, she said, they were not living in isolation. They did lots of things that their neighbors did. They had lots of contact with their neighbors. So it's entirely possible that the Welsh quilts, really inspired the Amish, those early Amish quilts. A County Durham club quilter used contrasting borders on her stuff quilts. We were always trying to choose materials which stood washing without losing color, said a Welsh woman, for the household quilts were washed each year in spring and hung out to dry on a windy day. When nearly dried, they were thoroughly shaken out to make the padding fluff up again. Various cotton materials were in use about the middle of the last century, generally of a stout, hard-wearing kind, such as calico and Italian twilled cloth. I don't know what that is, but we can maybe assume that it's a twill weave, which, like denim is a stronger cloth. Calico was sometimes dyed at home, generally red, for one side of the quilt. Turkey twill or turkey red was very popular, and so was paisley, which had a red ground and patterns chiefly in yellow. Well, that's interesting. Red and yellow? Huh. I didn't realize there was any particular colors associated with paisley. Cotton prints, known in Wales as stamp, in all colors, particularly lilac, pink, and blue, and flowered chintz were often used, sometimes with white or brown calico for the back. Lilac print with turkey red twill borders was one surprising mixture. Generally, the delicate colors seem to have been less popular, perhaps because some were not fast and after several washings faded to a dirty white. Old quilters remember buying these materials at 5p or 6p a yard. Toward the end of the century, sateens became very popular. Sateens were popular also with the Amish, as well as many other quilt makers. And sateens are usually a satin weave, which is well, I don't even want to say it's like twill because it's just got longer floats with the. I'm trying to think, would it be the weft or the warp or the weft? But in any event, it's got these longer floats that gives it that silky, satiny quality. Towards the end of the century, sateens became very popular in the grandest colors, as one Welsh woman said, or sometimes figured or flowered. Flowered chintz or sateen in strong bright colors was often chosen for wedding quilts in Wales. This vogue for brightly colored, big, sprawling patterns is odd because the quilted design was lost on them, though it could be seen on the plain stuff generally used on the reverse side. A County Durham woman remembers that her mother would try to persuade her customers to choose plain rather than flowered sateen so that her quilting would show up better, but most quilters seem not to have been troubled about this. I gotta be honest, if I was being paid to quilt something by hand, and I did a really good job, I think I probably would be a little irritated about having to quilt on a flowered area where you wouldn't be able to see the quilting as well. I think it was this use of strongly patterned materials, together with the low rates of payment, which brought the technique of quilting to such a low state in South Wales. In County Durham, Mrs. Fletcher tells me that she has noticed the sewing is generally much better on old quilts made in the country districts than those. I'm going to scroll past all these pictures that we've already looked at. Than those from the pit villages, meaning the mines, where flowered sateens and quilt clubs flourished. When the quilted design was almost lost to view in a riot of colors, it is not surprising that quilters became careless about the drawing and the sewing, especially when working against time for a very few shillings. In the latter part of the 19th century, what is generally known in the North as a strippy or stripped quilt became popular in both districts, i.e. striped. Two contrasting materials were split lengthwise and seamed together to make a top cover with about 7 stripes. Well, where, guys, have we seen something like that? Turkey red and white were popular, or flowered print and white calico, and later sateen in two plain colors such as pink and brown are plain and flowered. Take away those patterns and 7 stripes sewn together is another Amish quilt called bars. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's just maybe becoming more and more like that. Dorothy Osler's right. Patchwork in great variety was used for the top covers of quilts throughout the 19th century. Some of it was strictly utilitarian, made of every scrap of material available, old or new, joined together in large rectangles for both sides of the quilt. As one old Welsh quilter said, old pieces of cloth, padded with rags, made a cheap quilt for the farm servants' beds. In fact, it cost nothing but the price of a few reels of cotton and the labor of piecing and quilting, which must have been considerable, but labor was cheap. Mrs. H.E. Lewis in Wales used cloth cuttings from her 2 brothers, who were tailors. Tailors' cuttings, including pieces of flannel and cloth and even tweed made in the local mills, were mentioned by others in Wales. Mrs. E. Black in County Durham also spoke of stuff quilts made from tailors' pieces. Quilts made of cloth pieces were remembered in Westmoreland as being very heavy, but people who used them wouldn't sleep under anything else. So, yeah, I think it was one earlier, maybe in this chapter about the batting and the wadding, if it wasn't a heavy quilt, it wasn't going to keep you warm, right? And the cotton batting was not as warm as wool. They liked a heavy quilt. A Cumberland woman remembered that her mother bought cloth samples from a firm at Warwick Bridge and made them up in handsome patchwork and patterns such as the American flag in red and black. Welsh quilters spoke of buying woolen pieces by the pound from a Bradford firm. Stuff quilts made of old material, more common in Wales than in the north, were apt to be a bit dingy, but Welsh flannel in bright red helped to cheer the effect. A typical quilt seen in Wales had an old red shawl with paisley border as its center, pieces of black flannel added all around, and squares of red flannel on the corners. Pieces of dark-colored flannel formed the underside. The bought pieces yielded brighter effects. Red, blue, and green cashmere patchwork was remembered by one old lady, and brown, red, green, and purple cloth by another. There was cotton patchwork also, made of old pieces. Nothing was ever cast away, everything washed clean and used again. Often the result was just a hodgepodge or crazy work, as they called it in the north, though some workers arranged the colors to form a rough pattern. One used generally a red center with bright colors round. Others would pick out pieces of 2 colors only for each quilt. Large pieces of beautiful and no doubt precious chintz were joined together in the same way, backed with white or natural linen, padded and stitched to make lovely quilts, such as 2 owned by members of the Griffith family in South Wales. The older one was made by a certain Elizabeth Griffith. I have a relative named Elizabeth Griffith. At Point's Castle in Pembrokeshire in 1770, of pink and blue flowered chintzes, and has always been bequeathed through several generations to an Elizabeth in the family. Well, I'm wondering if my Elizabeth Griffith got an old fancy quilt. Probably not. The other of later date has fawn as the predominant color. That's interesting. Fawn as the predominant color. I guess I'm wondering, depending on when that was made, I feel like every time I see a color that's sort of tan or, brownish, it used to be purple. So I'm wondering if the fawn is actually the original color. But we can't see it, so we would have no idea of knowing. Mosaic patchwork of small pieces cut with templates to geometric shapes, mainly hexagons, lozenges, and triangles, were also made in Wales. Perhaps when the scraps of material were dressmakers' cuttings too small for use in any other way. I have seen one, for instance, made by Mary Pantag about 1850, of cotton prints, lilac, pink, and blue, arranged in an elaborate design of borders and center, with white calico on the underside. But one of Mary's former assistants told me that her patchwork was more usually formed of large pieces and backed with brown calico. There were cuttings from silk gowns, too, such as those used by Mrs. Bowen's mother, and some people bought silk spares from Macclesfield for their smartest quilts. I'm wondering if silk spares are like just offcuts or something. I don't know what Macclesfield, if that's a store or if that's like a manufacturer. Pieces of material are still sold in some Welsh markets. For instance, at Maesteg or Maesteg. You know that my Welsh pronunciation is absolute garbage, but this Welsh market, I guess, is spelled Maes-Teg. So these material is sold in some Welsh markets for a few pence the pound for use in patchwork. Whilst the rectangular style in large pieces was the central characteristic of Welsh patchwork during the last century, the northern counties of England produced a great variety of handsome patterns made up of smaller shapes. A simple form is seen in many strippy quilts, which have bands of patchwork in blue, pink, lilac, or yellow prints, alternating with bands of plain or figured material. For instance, pink print patchwork with white calico between, or blue diamonds and white triangles making up the strips and yellow print between, or diamonds of various cotton prints with strips of lilac between. The patched strips are usually made up of triangles called half squares, lozenges, diamonds, and squares. And that's interesting. She's calling a lozenge, she's got diamonds in parentheses beside lozenge, but I don't know. I always feel like I've seen lozenge as like a kind of like a stretched out sort of like a rectangle with points on the ends, or like a, like a lozenge. But I guess it could also be like that, like a diamond shape, I guess, like a stretched out diamond shape. Many variations of the straight patchwork stripe make effective quilts characteristic of the northern counties. The popular quilting pattern known as bellows was cut out in two colors and the pieces fitted together alternately. So she's referencing a picture. Let's see. Figure 38. So this quilting pattern known as bellows. Okay. Unfortunately, this is hard to see. Let's see. Because I'm trying to imagine what this looks like. Oh, I can't quite see what that might look like, because I'm not seeing. I guess it looks kind of like some kind of pointy thing. Or maybe, I don't know. I mean, I picture a bellows as like a, it's got like a accordion type thing. I don't know. Okay. What did I just leave off? So this quilt was cut in two colors and the pieces fitted together alternately. It needed careful drawing and cutting, but no material was wasted. Zigzags made up of diamond patches running diagonally across a quilt and other varieties of broken stripes are often found, and a pattern called by some the American flag was popular in red, blue, or green on white. Let's see. So that one she's already mentioned. And the number she's got beside it, I think, is figure 15. So let's look and see, because this is not striking. I'm not remembering this. Sorry for scrolling, guys. Huh. Okay. So it doesn't say anything about this. I mean, this seems like a single Irish chain. It says white calico and turkey red patchwork quilt. The quilted twist border and stars fit into the patches, but the lines of the wine glass pattern run across the small red squares. So that's just those circles that are overlapping each other, kind of like, you know. Hey, Mama is a fan. How are you? It's been a while. I was just thinking about you. I looked up your YouTube and I shared it with somebody. So yeah, I guess this is what she's talking about, but I don't know how and in what way why this would be called American flag. So, who knows? And sometimes I think, sorry about this crazy scrolling, guys. Sometimes I kind of wonder if some of these books might reference the wrong. Pictures. Okay. Sorry. Looking for where we left off. Okay. I'll leave it on a pretty quilt. All right. So this American flag, whatever. Let's see. The border pattern, the tree of life, is also found in a single patchwork stripe running up the center of a quilt. On an American quilt, illustrated in Ruth Finley's book, is called Tree Everlasting. And she's referencing another Red Star quilt made by Miss Sanderson, famous as a stamper, which was a popular pattern in various colors. The white star, each point of the red star, and each border strip is cut out in one piece. Mrs. Fletcher told me that her grandmother in County Durham used it on many quilts in red and dark green for the boys' beds. Another good all-over patchwork pattern is made up of squares divided into 8 triangles of alternate red and white, alternating with plain white squares. So that's just your standard, right? Your standard whirling pattern. Let's see, it was a popular pattern in various colors. Oh, whoops. I probably, if Dee Marie's here, I'm probably annoying her because she's usually following along. Cumberland quilts are said always, within living memory, to have been a patchwork or applied quilt. The American flag, a small star pattern, and various others were seen in the Penrith district. That's the first time she's mentioned Penrith, whatever that is. Westmoreland quilts also show much patchwork, though white, colored, and striped quilts were also found. Mosaic patchwork making up the whole top cover of the quilt was also used in the North, and several examples seen showed a great sense of color with effective use of white. Let's see, figure 39, we're back there, so let's see. Okay, that's the basket quilt that I had up for a long time. There's the basket quilt. So this shows one of the favorite patterns, baskets, which was also popular in America. Here it is most commonly seen in red and white, but the example illustrated has pink baskets on a yellow ground. Oh my gosh, I would have never guessed that's what we're looking at. I would have just assumed that this was like maybe white with, or like just white with colored baskets. So pink and yellow, I love it. The quilter who made it for her daughter's wedding said disapprovingly, "She had what she wanted, but I did not like the colors myself." The handles of the basket are cut out in one piece and applied. I saw a quilt in Weardale on which the baskets themselves, 42 of them, are all applied. Wow. So I mean, we don't have a picture of that, but I'm wondering if it's baskets like this or if they're more of a solid, because my gosh, if you were going to applique all of those triangles, that would make me crazy. I would not want to do that. The most striking applied work is on a quilt belonging to Mrs. Crudis Cruddas, of Rookhope, Weardale, and was made by her husband's great-grandmother. Okay, so that would have been fairly old. Let's see. Should be this next one. And bear with me. I'll only scroll. Oh my goodness. Is this it? Yes, look at this, you guys. Oh my gosh. This is pretty wild. So made by her husband's great-grandmother. So let's see what the... So this says white quilt with applied pattern in turkey red and green prints. So I guess this whole thing, aside from the stripes, is applied or appliqued. Word for nerd, I'm reading on page 102. So, quilted with 5 borders, chain and worm patterns. Has she mentioned a worm pattern yet? I don't remember that. So chain and worm patterns alternating, and diamonds in center with a border of stars. Piped edges. That's a new one. Made by Isabella Cruddas at Rookhope, County Durham, about 1850, and owned by Mrs. Martha Cruddas in 1954. So 100 years later. Fabulous. I love it. A Northumberland quilt, which was spoken of as something very special but was not seen, was described as patched with feathers. So I wonder if they would have been like princess feathers, maybe, in green twill on white. The pieced or applied work on many American quilts is based on quilting patterns well known here, such as wine glass. American versions are called melon patch and orange peel, and feather ring. And the Victoria and Albert Museum's notes on applied work and patchwork shows a running feather border pattern in patchwork. So that was this patterns we saw earlier. Interestingly enough, I can bring him into any conversation. Dr. Dunton happens to have that book in his collection. I have not flipped through it, but I do know. I remember seeing he's got several Victoria and Albert Museum little books on needlework in his collection. A Cumberland coverlet made in the first half of the 19th century has 5 plate motifs, more like oblong angular dishes, of flowered chintz applied on white in the center, and 4 borders of variegated patchwork finished with a border of black and brown print. This was quilted without any padding in a simple dog's teeth pattern on calico. Okay, so quilted with a dog's teeth pattern. So I'm guessing that she just means like a jaggedy, like a zigzaggy, because the dog's teeth border, that's a particular technique. So, but she's saying pattern and then it's quilted. So yeah, that just must mean like a jagged sort of quilting. In the same county, a patchwork quilt made up of white squares bordered with blue had 6 pennies of various colors applied with buttonhole stitch in a ring round a 7th central one on each square. One of these squares had originally been sent from Canada and copied. So it sounds like this is kind of like a penny rug sort of look. So a center one and then 6 around it, kind of like the penny rugs. Another piece of applied work, which had crossed the Atlantic, was found in Pembrokeshire, a flower pot pattern in red and green prints on white, made by the owner's great aunt and sent home to be quilted about 100 years ago. This type of work, not unusual in the North, compare Mrs. Cruddas' quilt mentioned above, seems to have been unknown in Wales and was not apparently imitated there. Most of the patchwork and applied work described above, except the 2 Griffith quilts, was made since the middle of the 19th century, so the Griffith quilts were older. One earlier piece of outstanding interest, certainly made before 1826, is Old Joe's quilt, in which the patchwork is composed partly of small patches, partly of large squares and strips. The large centerpiece of a flower basket and wreath and the heraldic corners are probably printed squares, which were made and sold specially for use in patchwork. The palm tree and pheasant squares were cut from an 18th century print made in imitation of Indian prints. Joe's customers may have supplied him with the materials from which he pieced their quilts. And so remember, this is this what she's referring to, and we saw that particular quilt. It's probably been a couple weeks ago now. But the Joe she's referring to is Joe the Quilter, which his whole story is in the appendix, which we will get to later. But he was very early 1800s, possibly even late 1700s, was an old man making quilts in the English countryside. So, and he was murdered. So there's that fascinating whodunit. They never did find out who killed him, but that whole story is at the end of this book. So we'll get to it eventually. Some people in Northumberland described the old quilts as having been mostly patched in big squares, oblongs, or stars. One had and big squares, oblongs, and stars are also what the Amish used. So we keep seeing these connections. Although Northumberland, that's North England, not Wales, right? One had a paisley square in the center and blue all round, which sounds like Wales. But the evidence suggests, on the whole, that all kinds of patchwork persisted throughout the 19th century in Northumberland, Cumberland, Westmoreland, County Durham, and Yorkshire, and that it was usually made as the top cover for a quilt. Several quilters spoke of how they used to sit patching at night. Scraps of print left over from dresses were all saved for patchwork. Pieces of print were bought from a firm in Leeds at 1 shilling and a penny for 100, or swatches from a Newcastle shop. So this sounds a lot like, what we've heard here in the U.S. of like these just offcuts and swatches that you could buy like through the Sears catalog and things like that. Mrs. Bell of Greenhead remembers that women came from Carlisle with big baskets of remnants of cotton print to sell, and her mother never turned them away. The bigger pieces were torn in strips for strippy quilts, like the pieces left over from Bondager's overalls, mentioned by Beatrice Scott, and the smaller ones cut into patches. In a Westmoreland village, I heard of a man who cut out the patches for his mother's quilts and sometimes sewed them together. Mrs. Whitwell, in the same county, told how her uncle, a Yorkshire cobbler, made many patchwork quilts for himself and members of his family, cutting out the hexagonal pieces with a penknife on his last, joining them and quilting them in a simple pattern following the shape of the pieces. So not even with scissors. And as an aside here, if you guys are familiar with the pretty famous quilter Ben Venom, he's shown quilts all over the world. Give him a Google if you're not familiar with who Ben Venom is. But when he first started quilting, he didn't have a rotary cutter, so he used an X-Acto knife to cut fabric. That's what this sounds like. Like, oh my God. There were probably some quilts made in the North, particularly the stuff quilts of tailor's pieces, as crude as those which were so plentiful in Wales. But generally the standard of patchwork is much higher in the North, and perhaps for that reason, the less carefully patched quilts were not brought out to show. Again, a higher standard of living in the North is indicated. People there could buy their pieces of print in sufficient quantity to choose the colors they wanted. Patchwork was treated as an art. It must be carefully planned, cut, and sewn to give a decorative effect. It was not merely a means of making good use of every scrap of material. The people in Wales were poorer. They were miners. I have studied patchwork in the North only incidentally, as it turned up in connection with quilting. What I found by accident suggests that a great deal more is stored in the farmhouses and cottages. Oh gosh, I don't even know. She's put this this dialect version. I have no idea what this woman is saying. Something to the kist for it, and one old lady looking for a quilt to show me, and many other kists, Kists. I'm wondering if she's meaning like a case or like some type of like a trunk or something. I don't know. Many other kists must hold similar treasure. So yeah, it must be something like some kind of piece of furniture, I'm guessing. I find worthy of record a quilter's dramatic description of a neighbor finishing a piece of patchwork. She loosed the papers and dashed it, and all the papers came out too. Okay, where Bernard says it's a chest. Okay. So it sounds like she clipped all of the strings that held the English paper piecing pieces in, and then she and the papers all came out. I have illustrated one quilt, which, strictly speaking, has no place in this book. Well, the next two. Oh my goodness, look at this. So this is a red and white calico coverlet made of groups of gathered patches, joined by flat, triangular, and rhomboid patches made by Isabella Crudas. Flat, triangular, and rhomboid patches. I mean, these look like hexagons to me, but I'm guessing they're split in half? I don't know. I can't tell. Okay. So everyone is saying a kist, an ancient coffin or burial chamber, any chest-like container, a box, a trunk, a basket, a coffin, especially a stone one, a sarcophagus. Okay. So any place you put a dead body or some buried treasure or all of the fabulous quilts you have. I have many kists around my house. Let's see. An interesting and unusual form of patchwork. So it's this one and not the next one, but the one after that. All right, we're getting close to being done here. Well, we might have to look at these later if they're... Okay. So this one, she's not referring to, but oh God, look at that. Okay, so this is a close-up of what's happening here. This is interesting. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this. Can you guys see what's happening here? It's like this is gathered in here, and it's kind of like ruched. And then somehow these things are then... I don't know how that... I don't know what we're looking at here. So this is just a detail of that coverlet. Maybe she's going to explain more in this next chapter. But Robin says Google Pics show things similar to a small bench you can put things in. Okay. Maybe like a deacon's bench or something like that. Yeah. I like anything that has a lid. You put stuff in. You can hide all your stuff in there. So this is really interesting. I'm not exactly sure how this, because I mean, you think about if you're doing some type of like gathering and it's cinching it together, then how... To me, this looks like it's stuffed or something. I don't know. You guys haven't see early example of a puff quilt, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe each one of these has, stuff in it, and it's not really gathering. It's just kind of like stitching that in the center and then whip stitching all this stuff together. And that would make sense if this is like a puff quilt or, a biscuit quilt, that kind of thing. Maybe that's why she's saying these kind of, strictly speaking, don't have any place in this book. But I mean, if it's made like a traditional puff, it's just these little units are made and then the little units are stitched together. How is that really any different than an actual quilt? It's got front, back, center. I think it's still a quilt. That's just my opinion. By this point, we can say that because these came back in the 70s as like big time. Okay, hexagonal patches are gathered tightly by several running threads and attached to an inner lining to keep them in place. The whole backed with a loose white lining. Okay. Considerable skill must have been used to construct this piece of work. It is not quilted and hardly could be, but its peculiar texture gives it a rich appearance, comparable to the effect of quilting. Yeah, I'm still not, I'm not, yeah, it said they were gathered with a running stitch. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not understanding like how this is made, but this is definitely what she's referring to, these pictures. So we're going to have to look into that. Although a considerable amount of patchwork is done nowadays, I have not seen any in the simple two-color traditional patterns which are so worthy of revival. Quilting certainly enhances their appearance by adding richness of texture, but unquilted they are still handsome. Turkey twill, I think this is true, she's calling it turkey twill, whereas we just would call turkey red. And I'm wondering, is turkey twill red? Is it always red? Or is turkey twill something different? I don't know. I mean, she's mentioned turkey red, so I'm curious to know if that's the same thing. I don't know. Turkey twill is still to be bought, and reasonably good substitutes for other colored prints if genuine old pieces cannot be found. The finished work has a character of its own without the intricacy of mosaic patchwork, which generally involves the collection of a multitude of scraps, or of the often over-elaborate American piecework. It has an effective simplicity and naive charm. So she's got that little jab in there, the over-elaborate American piecework. Like, how dare you, Americans? Oh my goodness, too funny. All right. Well, you guys, that is that. So, well, I guess I didn't finish up that early, but I'm going to get on out of here so that I can finish my packing. As a reminder, I will not be here next Monday, next Thursday, or the following Monday. I will be back, let's see, let me find the date again, on October 23rd. So, and I will have many stories, surely, and things to show you from seminar. So, oh, Mama has a details for us. All right, so turkey twill refers to an embroidery technique where a red heavy cotton twill fabric is used as a base for applique and other decorative designs. Interesting. All right. Thanks, Druid. And yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Remember, yes, I will absolutely raid Druid. Remember, we do have, Quilt Nerding does have a pre-recorded video going up on Tuesday. So it'll go up at 2 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, YouTube's Quilt Nerding. Quilt Nerding's YouTube. So look for that. It is about a pretty cool exhibit that was at the New England Quilt Museum about green quilts. So, and as far as I know, there's no poison green. So, yeah. So have a great week, guys. I will miss you bunches. And I look forward to telling you about all the fun stuff when I get back. Okay. All right, Druid, if I remember how to raid. Let's see. Raid, and then, what was it? IGLEYE7. I hope I did that right. Okay, so we'll get ready to do that, and then I'm going to split, so Jared, you'll have to tell them who we are and why. All right.